Welcome to the Open Forum in the Villages, Florida podcast. In this show, we talk to leaders in the community, leaders of clubs, and interesting folks who live here in the Villages to get perspectives of what is happening here in the Villages, Florida. We are a listener-supported podcast. There will be shout-outs for supporters in episodes. In Season 6, we will continue making substantial improvements to the podcast.
This is Mike Roth. And listeners, I'm thrilled to share with you this podcast, which is my passion project for you. This podcast brings me joy, brings you knowledge, inspiration, and a lot of things that people need to know about the Villages and the people living here. Be sure to hit the follow button to get the newest episode each week. Creating this podcast is a labor of love, even though it demands more time than I can easily spare. Now, here's where you come in. You can help us keep the podcast alive and thriving. How? By becoming a supporter. The easy way for you to support us is to visit our podcast webpage, openforuminthevillagesflorida.com, and click on the supporter button at the top of the page, or the purple supporter box on the right side of the page. Even a small donation of $3 to $10 a month makes a big difference. And guess what? You can cancel your subscription at any time. No strings attached. Your support means the world to us. Stay curious, stay inspired, and keep those headphones on. I hope everyone enjoys today's show. This is Open Forum in the Villages, Florida. I'm here today with Frank Lancione. Frank has been retired here in the Villages for 10 years. How come you moved to the Villages?
Oh, interesting story. We had no interest in moving to the Villages. We were on our way to Cocoa Beach for a weekend, which was a place that I always enjoyed, right after I retired, to celebrate my birthday, 66th birthday. And I said, this place, the Villages, where I was listening to that silly thing, why don't we just stop in there and see what it is? Hot damn, 2 days later, we left town with a second house.
You didn't take the trolley tour, did you? Okay.
No.
We do a bit in the improv about the trolley tour.
I think we saw, even in that short period of time we were here, we saw there was something different about the Villages. And in fact, that's actually an interesting discussion. When people describe the Villages to other folks, most people say, we have X number of pools and X number of holes of golf. And my rejoinder to that is, anybody can do that. Anybody can build those buildings. What you have in the Villages is 150,000 people within about a 20-year or 30-year span. And I would say if you went to the University of Michigan, okay, when it's out of season, it's one type of place. But when it's in season, 30,000 kids come into town.
Right.
They dominate the culture. In the Villages, if you're at median age 67.8, the culture is about you. The parking spaces are big. The restaurants cater to you. Nowhere else in the world can you go where the culture is about you in your senior years. That's pretty unique. I can't imagine living anywhere else.
Yeah. When we looked at retirement communities, when I knew I was leaving Cincinnati, because I was tired of the snow in 2017. I never wanted to see snow for real. On TV, it's okay. But snow and ice, I had enough of it. And we looked at various places in the South, and we came here. And I said, I don't play golf very much anymore. Never had developed a big interest in it. And so that wasn't a big plus. But the thing that flipped me over and said we had to move to the Villages was the fact that at the time there were 2,200 clubs and activities. No place else we see more than about 150.
And every one of those is somebody's dream. They're not done by the developer. They're not done by some professional in the recreation department. They're somebody's dream. I remember our time here, we went around to one of the rec centers. There was a music box festival.
Oh, yes. I've done a couple of shows from there.
I can't believe it. If you are a music box enthusiast.
It's called mechanical music.
You think you're one of the few people in the world. Instead, no, there's a whole club here. And you can't think of a topic that
they have
the club on.
150-year-old mechanical organs and music boxes. Phenomenal stuff. And one time we were at a rec center early for a meeting to set up for a potluck dinner.
Right.
And we opened the door to the room where the meeting was supposed to be, but we were more than a half hour early. And there were guys and ladies in white suits with masks and swords. They were fencing. It was a fencing club. We looked in and said, okay, close the door. We'll wait a half hour. But you never know what you're going to find here in the villages.
And actually, I write about that.
Do you?
Yeah. I have a series of books called Sunset Years, and it's poems and essays. I've got 4 books in that series. I started writing as I was getting close to 70. I realized, gosh, 70 is a big deal. So I started writing poems because it just turned out to be that was comfortable for me to write that way. And I started writing about the things I was doing and my friends were doing and the life that we had here. When I got done, I had about 105 poems. And then I wrote a second book of poems. As I started to look across both books, what I realized was there were some common themes. I went to a Jesuit college and they make you look across things and say what's similar and what's not. And the themes all came down to this idea of what does it mean to be in your senior years? In the general culture, they regard our senior years. We look like an anomaly. You're washed up. Your relationship to your wife is you're just roommates because it's too hard to break up because you have financial commitments. They can't imagine you. And in fact, you're usually like a character of comic relief. That's not the life we have here. Go to a center. People are holding hands. People are getting second and third marriages here when their spouses die. So the philosophy I abstracted out of all that was the good life, the sunset years way of life.
So why don't you tell our listeners what the sunset years philosophy is in a few words?
Never stop striving, never stop dreaming, never stop achieving, even in your 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond.
Okay. And Frank, in the sunset years, you wrote some poetry at first. What is your favorite poem?
All of them.
Of course, you're the author.
But I have some that are good. One of the first ones that I wrote after we came back from a 3-month RV trip, and we covered 10,000 miles. We had circumnavigated the U.S. And I think, as I've mentioned to you in other forums, if you go 10,000 miles in an RV and there's something weak in it, it's going to break. You spend 3 months with somebody day and night in that little RV, and you have something wrong with your relationship, it's going to break too. And ours didn't. I was inspired by that when I got back. So if you ask me about favorite poems, that's certainly one of them. That's called Still the One. I have it if you want me to read it.
Sure, there's something very unusual for open forum in the villages. We're going to hear a poem.
All right. Let me see if I can find it. The book is available on Amazon. I say I'm probably the only 70-plus-year-old poet anywhere writing love poems to 70-plus-year-old women.
You mean?
Woman. Yes, woman, my wife.
Yes.
Still the one. You fret because you're 70. Hun, you still look great to me. You've got a few wrinkles and some new curves too, but I like this older version of you. We've loved each other for 50 years. Faced life, good and bad, its laughter, its tears. Our grandkids laugh because I still hold your hand, but you still light me up like a rock concert band. Yes, it's true, our bodies do look old, but our love, our life is still hot, fresh, bold. I love the warmth of you pressed full against me, and that we still know love's ecstasy. I still think about you when we're apart. You're still the one written on my heart. You're my history, my destiny. And when my days are done, my last words will be, you're still the one.
That's a great poem, Frank.
I love it. Now, my wife, I've had women come up to me and say, oh my God, your wife must be so happy. And I say, she's an introvert. She's embarrassed. But she also likes them.
Okay.
And yeah, and I took a lot of the love poems from this volume, which was an anthology. I put them in a standalone book called Poems for Seniors Who Still Love Each Other. And so when I'm at a big book expo or show and guys come up, I'll say, so you have a wedding ring there. How'd you like to be a hero for $5? How'd you like to give your wife a book of love poems? Come on, $5, you're going to be a hero. And you know what? The wives love it. They love it. They always come back and tell me, oh my God, I'm so glad you did that.
Okay. And that poem is in a book. It's available on Amazon.
All of my books. I have 8 books on Amazon currently, and you can get them if you go Frank A. Lancione Sunset Years. It'll pull up.
Spell your last name for our listeners.
Lancione. So Frank A. Lancione. And that'll pull up. And if you put in Sunset Years, it'll pull up. I have 2 series. I have books of poems and essays, and then I have a murder mystery series.
Frank, I understand that you've recently put on a play here in the villages that's based on your new book series, which is a strange but innovative idea. where you have in the same, I'm going to call it a book. They're nice soft cover books, a little bit larger than 8 by 11 in dimensions. You have a play, then in the book is first a book, then it's a play, and then it teaches people how to play the play
As
into a game.
Book, play, game.
Play game. That's very unusual.
About 2.5 years ago, I started putting on games for my friends and neighbors. And we had actually gone to a little event where somebody had a game they downloaded from the internet. And it was very simplistic. It just said, you know him because you're his banker. If somebody accuses you, say, I didn't do it, accuse someone else. I thought, God, this is simplistic. It's just like process of elimination. And my wife and I love murder mysteries. They're all about motive, means, and opportunity, who had it, and who can you eliminate. So I said, I could write something better than this. It took me about 1.5 months.
Okay. Now, Frank, we're going to take a short break and listen to an Alzheimer's tip from Dr. Craig Curtis, and then we're going to come back and learn a little bit more about these book, play, game publications. Dr. Curtis, can you give our listeners a tip on keeping their brain healthy?
Absolutely. My favorite tip involves a change in eating patterns, but it's not a drastic change. It's simply increasing the amount of fresh fruits and vegetables, fish, other white meats, and lowering the amounts of red meat, sweets and sugars, and also carbohydrates. It's essentially following a Mediterranean type diet plan.
With over 20 years of experience studying brain health, Dr. Curtis's goal is to educate the Villages community on how to live a longer, healthier life. To learn more, visit his website, craigcurtismd.com, or call 352-500-5252 to attend a free seminar.
Thank you, Dr. Curtis. So, Frank, how long ago did you bring out the first 2 of the books? I think you brought them both out at the same time.
Yeah, I've actually published 3 over this summer, in the summer of 2024. And I have a 4th that I have the proof copy with me, and I'm going to be publishing that before Thanksgiving of 2024. By Christmas, I'll have 4 books in this series there.
Okay, and tell our listeners what the titles are.
Oh, it's fun. One is Death of a Socialite. Another is Deserve to Die. Another is Double Down on Death. And the 4th is one of my favorites, Death by Cat.
Yeah, that sounds like Creator Roy's problem.
It's a very interesting book, and cat lovers see that and they go, oh my God, it's very interesting. What is it? What's fun about this is nowhere in these books do the 2 words, the and villages, appear together. So it's not about the villages. It just happens to be about a mythical town called Sunset Years, which happens to be the name of my series of poems and essays. It has about 150,000 people in it. That's located near Central Florida, just southeast of Ocala. And by the way, every place in it, which happens to be this geography, they're not copyrighted. So I talk about Riverbend Rec Center. I talk about Monarch Grove neighborhood. I talk about the names of the streets. I talk about the restaurants. I talk about all of that. And it's very comical because I set these all in my neighborhood, which is Linden, Marshbend, and Monarch Grove. And people in my neighborhood who know me and know about the books go, oh my God, there was a murder over by Swallowtail Postal Service. Oh no. You know that sinkhole? Oh my God, somebody was killed over there, and it's all in the neighborhood, and it's a lot of fun. So we have some fun with that.
Yeah, occasionally there are sinkholes.
This woman just gets pushed into one, doesn't fall away from underneath her.
That's an interesting idea to put in a book. Which came first, the play or the book?
The play. I put on about 12 plays in the last 2.5 years. When I first did this, I did it as a game. I invited 10 of our friends. We got a room in a rec center. And we did a potluck and we played the roles. So basically like a fun evening for a family. So I did that twice. On the 3rd time, a very entrepreneurial young woman who was in charge of the rec center said, gosh, this is interesting. Could you do this for us? And I said, like, there's only 10 people can play. We could be up front and then we could have an audience. And then she became a business partner and a co-conspirator. So we did it with 30 people the first time and 50 people the second time. We were up to 80 people by the 3rd time. Now I'm doing it routinely for audiences of 85 to 100. And we're going to be doing it on November 12th of 2024 at Colony. People can sign up through the recreation stations.
How many dates? further out into December and January?
I have one coming up in February at one of the independent living homes. So we're working on the date. And I just recently talked to a financial services company about sponsoring these because I have a heart to go into the independent living facilities, put these plays on, provide an opportunity for the people who are residents to become actors in the play, and then have the people in the facility have the fun of participating. This is a real interactive experience audience.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, even in the audience, if you're in the audience at the end of each of the 3 acts, you have a sheet. You vote on who you think did it, and you discuss your ideas with the people around you. And then I go out and debrief the audience a little bit, and then we go on. So everybody who's up front as an actor, as well as everybody in the audience, has a sense of participation. We did the first one at Resort Lifestyle Community up on 466. They loved it. It had 112 people in the facility, and there's only about 200 people in the facility. They had a few outsiders. So we had about 50% of the facility came to the play.
And each title, like Murder by Cat, always comes out with the same perpetrator?
Yes, this is an interesting thing. Since I originally conceived it as a game, one of the things was I had a set of badges for people to wear. And so instead of making different name badges every time, I just recycled the names in each new edition. And I also did something else. I made all the names gender neutral so that a man or a woman could play it, although they do have sexes.
Right, so the names are
Robin, Emery, Drew, Jules, Nikki, could go either way kind of thing. And in fact, in the 4 books, it's fun. I started illustrating them with AI avatars. So each person has an avatar. So you could take 4 pictures of Emery Landon. Some are men, some are women, some are old, some are young, some are handsome, some are really comical looking.
Did you use the same AI for the creations of the photos?
Yeah, I did.
Which AI did you use?
So I use Microsoft Copilot, the DAL E3 Illustrator. And I had a lot of fun with that. And actually, I'm going to be speaking in the month of November at the Writers League of the Villages on the second Wednesday of the month. So it's coming up next week on illustrating your story with AI, which is really interesting. I know you used AI for your logo.
We use a lot of AI in the show.
Yeah, I've been seeing this stuff. What you're doing with the sound is amazing. For a self-published author, the opportunity to create images of your characters in your locales in AI is a huge step. I mean, it's transformational.
I'm looking at the covers of 4 or 5 of your books now, and the covers are just fantastic for a self-published author.
It would be about $6,000 or $7,000 if I had to do it with an illustrator.
Probably each one.
Yeah.
Those are quality illustrations, good fonts, some unusual things that were done.
Here's the thing I'm going to be talking to the Writers League about, which we're all mostly self-published authors. The act of interacting with AI to create a picture of your author, I'm going to compare it to the paradigm of being a casting director, because you have to give a verbal description to the AI that catches the nuances of the character. You have to describe the background, the foreground, the style, the age, the quality, the financial level. So when you do that, and it's an iterative process because it'll give you 4, you might reject all of those. So you might have to do that 10 times until you get something and you say, that's Robin Logan.
That's it.
That's the right character.
I created the new logo for the Open Forum in the Villages, Florida podcast using Microsoft Copilot.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, and the quality of your prompt that you give it is directly shown in the output. Now I took it one step further. Okay, because Microsoft's Copilot with DALL-E 3 always gives you a kind of square picture. And everyone today is using computer monitors and TVs that are rectangular, 16 by 9. So there's another AI program that will take your output from DALL-E and then fill in the left and the right side for you.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah. That's pretty fantastic.
I'm going to get that before I leave.
And if anyone else wants to get it, it's in my AI course, which is going to be taught again in the Enrichment Academy in the spring and summer.
So this is what I think about AI. There are people who say, oh, we have to resist. It's a futile resistance. If you're an author, what I'm going to be talking to my fellow authors about is this idea that Once people begin to illustrate their stories with high quality images, because they can, you're going to be like the travel agent of the past, or the person still trying to use a manual typewriter when everybody else is using word processing. And those of us who suffered through college with the whiteout tape and the manual typewriters, we wouldn't go back to that. We wouldn't give up what we have today in our software and in our ability to design books, basically lay out our own books.
I wouldn't have got through college if my grandmother hadn't been a secretary.
Oh, my goodness.
And when I had to do a term paper, she would sit down in front of her typewriter at home and say, Michael, dictate your term paper. And she would type it out almost flawlessly for me.
Wow.
That was the only way I could do it.
Try to write a thesis. Today, that's easy. I marvel the books I write. 160 pages, no problem at all, because these plays, the scripts are different. And that would have been a thesis in college.
But AI can do a lot more today and is doing more and more every day.
It's transformed the plays. So in my first versions, I didn't have avatars of the characters. So what I would do is I'd have the name of the character color-coded, a color-coded badge. It would pop up on the screen, and people would look at the person who was reading. With an avatar that is colorful and unique, people look at the avatar up on the screen. The person reading, and in my plays, I do it so that you don't have to memorize anything. I give you a script to read. It's a witness statement. So I ask for your statement, then you read your statement. Well, you're now off to the side. And so it makes it a little easier for somebody to be a quote unquote voice actor.
Yeah, the quality of writing that we're getting out of AIs today is phenomenal. I've taken now to my more complex emails, and people have a tendency to send me sometimes very long emails. I'll attempt to write a reply and then feed the input email and my reply into the AI, ask the AI to fix my output, and the results are phenomenal.
I wouldn't want to be an English teacher today. It's going to be very difficult.
I used to think that people using AIs were cheating, and I now believe that AIs are making us better people because they can fix the flaws that we have, and then we can see what is better than what we can do ourselves.
So think about the Industrial Revolution and the transition from handmade things to mass-produced things.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's AI, if you can put that in conceptual terms. The dog work of reading something to get the typos out of it. It's a mechanical, predictive process. That could be turned over to AI. But deciding what to write, that's still something that a human author does. Deciding what equates to, the themes, the emotions, that creativity is still very much a human function.
So as a writer, what do you think about whole books that are written by AIs? I wish everyone could see Frank's face when I ask that question.
So I think if you go to look at pottery, you say you go into a museum and you look at a piece of pottery. A handmade piece of pottery is more likely to be in a museum because it's unique, it's one-off, and its imperfections are a part, actually, of what makes it unique and attractive to us. Compare that to a piece of pottery that just comes off a line and it's one of 1,000 pieces of glazed stuff. I think in the future, we're going to value those things which were human-made the same way we talk about handmade versus mass-produced. And an AI-generated book is going to have some certain characteristics to it that'll be different than a human-generated book, at least probably during our lifetime. Although I will tell you, I was supposed to do this talk in October, but because of the storm, it was canceled. In the 30 days since October, I have to rewrite the talk because the interface to the software works differently than it did 30 days ago.
When I started contemplating teaching this AI course for the villagers, I counted up 168 AIs out there.
Wow.
And what I didn't realize is that number increases by someplace between 5 and 10 every 2 days. We're dealing with an explosion in the economy, okay, which I think can only help us as a country.
So paradigms are interesting. When I'm talking to the author group, they write something in word processing, Microsoft Word. They come back to it. It's the same thing that was there the last time. And then they change it. They come back to it again. It's the same thing with their new enhancements. It's not the way you do graphics in AI. You are submitting a request to a centralized server that is giving you perhaps 1 microsecond of time and then answering your request and it's sent back to you.
It's taking a look at a very large sample of examples that were loaded into its large language.
So that's the story.
But
okay, wait a minute. So then you say, I'd like to have that guy's hair be brown. By the time that request hits the server, and even if it was only a minute ago, 1 million people have requested things. And as a result, the database is different than it was when you made your request just 60 seconds ago. And they don't find your old request and change it. They present the problem to the large language model. It comes back with a new response. So you can't say, move them 2 inches to the left. It's a different model that comes back to you.
some models actually will take modifications to your existing request. And then very recently, I became aware of AI that are not based on the large language model, but a specific set of models which are different. When we get into robotics and what jobs can Boston Scientific's robots replace, they're talking about high-paid jobs in the automobile industry, and they can put a robot in there to do that job, to do the heavy lifting, or actually a series of robots.
So I was a government employee for about 10 years, and I went and became a management consultant, and I did a lot of work in the government. When AI becomes fully implemented, we're going to see a total collapse in the federal workforce.
I don't think, at least in the foreseeable future, and I've been wrong about these things before, that AI will ever be complete.
No, it'll always go. But as it gains capability right now, if you were to go into a federal agency, there are legions of people who they look at your situation, and be it a grant proposal or a case or a request. They look at a regulation, they match the two up, they make a decision as to whether or not you qualify, and then they send you back a judgment. So that type of reasoning, I have a reference model. Where are you against this reference model? How compliant are you with it? What are your differences? What are my scores? What will I allow? That's absolutely automatable.
And there's a service called Delphi that allows you to create a clone of yourself. It's one thing to create a clone of your voice. This Delphi model takes specific situations and rules so that your voice can respond to particular problems.
So based on the Oracle of Delphi, and back in the 90s, the early work done with expert systems, how does your best employee, what is it that they do that allows them to make those excellent judgments and have the lowest error rate? So let's capture those rules and inculcate them in some sort of a system.
Have you ever heard of SIM data?
No.
Okay. People working on large databases with actual numbers, like the number of voters that are registered to each party in a particular district, precinct, and then creating the exact replica, for another county done by AIs. That would be simulated data. And simulated data can then be used as input to other AIs to figure out, say, the results of an election instead of polling.
So that's what Nate Silver basically runs his model. And it's basically how many scenarios. Let's run it as though it was a coin flip, and we'll run it 800 times. And we'll see how many times of those it went one way, how many times of those it went another way. Yeah, all development in our lifetime.
Now, in the old days of statistical data, 800 coin flips might be a fair-sized sample.
Not now.
With the computers, you might have 8 trillion samples that need to be summarized or could easily be simulated.
And that's the power of AI. A human would take eons to do that, and AI can do it in a matter of minutes. That ability to learn which ones work and which ones don't. You take 1,000 random tests in a second.
Yeah, we're at the very beginning of the AI revolution, and I think that we're going to see a lot more. Frank, we're going to stop here today, and thank you very much for being on the show.
Mike, thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Remember, our next episode will be released next Friday at 9 a.m. Should you want to become a major supporter of the show or have questions, please contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. This is a shout-out for supporters Ed Williams, Duane Romick, Paul Sorgen, Kathy Loving, and Dr. Craig Curtis at K2 in the Villages. We will be hearing more from Dr. Curtis with short Alzheimer's tips each week. If you know someone who should be on the show, contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. We thank everyone for listening to the show. The content of the show is copyrighted by Roth Voice 2024. All rights reserved.